I worked as a summer park ranger at Yellowstone in 2014. I was 27 and newly graduated from college, then seeking a bit of adventure. I thought the most annoying aspect of the job would be individuals ignoring safety signage or bears breaking into camps. But nothing could have prepared me for what occurred on a night that October. Our ranger station was located way out in a remote corner of the park 12 miles from the nearest paved road. Their cabins, there were some ancient rickety buildings and miles of solid pine woods to surround them. Off-season, I was usually just me and another ranger covering that whole area. On the night I'm going to tell you about, I was completely alone. I was doing my usual late-night patrol, making sure no campers had wandered away from the trails. The wind was chilly, the woods so quiet you could hear your heart pounding. As I rode the truck down a narrow dirt road, I noticed something out of the way, a light far in the woods away from any organized campgrounds. At first, I assumed that it was a stranded hiker or someone who had chosen to ignore the regulations. I reported it over the radio, but the reception was bad, only static. I had no choice but to check it out myself. I parked the truck and grabbed my flashlight. The deeper I walked into the woods, the more uneasy I felt. The glow wasn't from a campfire, it was a lantern, gently swaying like someone was holding it in their hand. I shouted out, "Hello, park ranger." Lost. No answer. The lantern stopped moving, just hung there in the distance. I lengthened my stride, my boots crunching leaves, but when I reached the spot, nothing. No lantern, no shape, just silence. My chest tightened. I know these was I told myself. I didn't make it up. I went around to return, but then I heard it. Footsteps. Not animal, but heavy, deliberate footsteps surrounding me in the dark. I swept my light around, but every time the beam passed over the trees, nothing appeared. Then something called out my name, clear and loud. Daniel. My blood ran cold. No one should have known my name in those woods. The whisper once more closer, nigh in my ear. Daniel. I spun around, my heart thudding. Nothing. I ran back to the truck, but when I reached it, I saw fresh boot prints in the dust alongside mine, long, deep ones like someone had been pacing back and forth while I was gone. The strange thing? They weren't going away. They just stopped. Like whoever it was had vanished into thin air. By the time I got back to the station, I was shaking so hard I could barely get the keys into the lock. Inside, I once again tried to use the radio, still in static. Then, faintly coming from outside the window, I saw it. That same lantern light back and forth coming straight to the tree line. I stood paralyzed at the window. The lantern had come closer this time, maybe 30 feet from the cabin. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight. I told myself it was a joke, some hunter having fun with me, but my instinct screamed otherwise. I flicked off the cabin lights and hunched down, trying to make myself disappear. Then I heard the crunching of leaves and branches outside. Slow, heavy, right towards the cabin door. My mouth was dry. The doorknob rattled once, then held still. I couldn't breathe. 4 or 5 drawn-out minutes, all I could listen to was breathing on the other side of the door. Deep, labored, near animal, but too human to be mistaken. I finally grabbed my rifle and screamed, "You have to get out now." The gasping stopped. Complete silence. I prepared myself, flung open the door, prepared into the black. Nobody. Only empty woods. That's when I realized that something was horribly wrong. The lantern was suspended from a tree branch in front of the cabin. I swear on my life it hadn't been there seconds before. I directed the flashlight beam upwards and my stomach dropped. The lantern was suspended from rope. It was suspended from what seemed to be strips of skin. I stepped back, gagging. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the rifle. I slammed the door and locked at my heart racing my chest. For hours I sat there staring at the door, the faint sound of footsteps pacing around the cabin, round and round. At 3 a.m., silence settled again. No lantern, no footsteps, only utter silence. The following day, I recounted it all to them. They organized a search party, but there was nothing, no trace of footprints, no lantern, nothing whatsoever. They made fun of me, telling me that I must have been exhausted. But I witnessed what I witnessed. That boot print, that voice saying my name, that lantern hung from human flesh. None of those things was exhaustion. I quit the work at the end of that season and did not go back. Even now, years later, I wake up in the middle of the night with a sureness that I hear my name being called in the dark. And the terror, the odor. Every time I recall that evening, I can smell it once again. That subtle coppery odor of blood hanging in the air. Believe it or not, I'll never forget. It started with a typical call. Approximately 9 p.m. dispatch had reported that a family had reported strange screams outside campsite 12. They'd cut short their visit and hastily decamped, frightened enough to strike camp in the dead of night. I hadn't given it much thought. Coyotes did sound like wailing children. Tourists weren't used to how eerie the woods could get at night. Anyway, it was my job to check out. I drove the dirt road until it became a trail, then stopped and proceeded on foot with only my flashlight, sidearm, and radio. By the time I got to the spot, the forest was strangely quiet. Not the usual nighttime cricket song or rustling leaves, but only silence, so heavy it echoed in my ears. The campsite itself was empty, fire still ablaze in the ring. Their cooler had been left open with food half-packed. They'd clearly rushed out of there. I swept the edge, lighting up the tree line with my beam. That is where I saw the first footprints. At first I thought it was a barefooted hiker, but the prints seemed strange. The toes seemed too long, close to claw-like, and the step was unusually wide. I bent down to examine it closer, and the ground showed two things worse. The track circled around the farm site many times, in and out, like whatever or whoever it was had been stalking. My radio crackled, but instead of dispatch I heard what could only be termed as raspy breathing. Deep, ragged, and wet. I stopped the beam of the flashlight to dance off the trees. I tried to call back to dispatch, but the static closed in on me. That was when the silence was broken. A scream erupted out of deep in the forest. Not a coyote, not a mountain lion. It was human, high-pitched, desperate, and it sounded like it echoed for too long, like it bounced off tree to tree. I started towards it, racing heart, reminding myself that it was my responsibility to help. But the closer I got, the more off it sounded. The scream didn't move, it stayed rigid in one position, repeating almost identically each time, like something was duplicating it. At the far end of the beam, beyond the tree lean, I noticed movement. A tall, thin figure crouched in an unnatural stance. Its face, or at least what I think to have been its face, was pale and almost featureless. When my beam landed on it, completely, it took off across the woods faster than any human being I have ever known. There was a snapping of branches like machine guns as it vanished, and the screaming stopped at once. I don't remember dashing back to my truck, but ended up slapping the door shut, shaking so hard my keys almost dropped. The woods behind were still dark, still silent. I radioed in calling Kama Habit and reported the area as cleared. I knew I hadn't cleared anything though. I crawled home to base in my flashlight, shaking down the trail, every shadow making me flinch. I swore I was seeing things, that fatigue was playing tricks on me. But the second night things got worse. The following evening I was on duty again. The following call was made, not screams once more, but lost equipment. A family camping near the lake informed me that their lanterns, shoes, even their map disappeared overnight. I tried to dismiss it, raccoons or thoughtless campers, but my gut dropped when I heard their camp number, 12. I went back, however, every fiber of my existence screamed not to. When I arrived, the couple were tense, but relieved. They swore that they had heard somebody walking around their tent at 3 a.m. But when they called out, nobody answered. They asked if I could check around. I said I was trying to be casual, although my hand never left my gun. As I gazed over the edge of the perimeter, I found that it had all been thrown out approximately 30 yards into the woods, just lying there as if done intentionally. Shoes aligned, lanterns stacked pyramid style, the map wedged into the limb of a tree with a sharpened rod. It wasn't done randomly. It seemed like somebody or something was playing a game. The two left in the evening, also scared to stay. I could not blame them. When they had left, I stayed behind to record the scene. It was when I heard it again. The scream. This time, however, it was closer. Too close. It was behind me, however, when I turned about, nothing was there. My beam of light trembled over the trees, however, no eyes glimmered back. My breath fogged in the cold air, however, it was not cold a little while back. Then I smelled it, a stench of rotting meat and damp ground rising up out of the air. My chest tightened up. I eased back radio in my hand while I could hear limbs snapping overhead. Not in front, not behind, overhead. I flashed my light upward into the canopy, and that's when I saw it. Clung to the trunk 20 feet in the air was the same white figure. Its arms were too long, bent at the wrong angle, fingers buried in the bark like knives. Its head was tilted as though looking at me. No eyes, no mouth, just empty skin pulled tight where a face had been. I couldn't move. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs locked. Then it tilted its head further, and from its blank face came that same scream I'd heard before, blasting through the silence, so loud my ears rang. It wasn't an echo this time. It was coming from right above me. Something within me snapped, and I sprinted to my truck, not even daring to look back. The smell remained faint, but there until I was driving the woods, shrinking in my rear view. I turned to my report, but left out the details. What would I say to them? That a ghostly presence haunted a campsite and mimicked human screams. They'd laugh me out of the service. I quit after 1 week. Even to this day, years later, I don't go into the woods by myself. People wonder why I left my career as a ranger. I explain I burned out. But the truth is a little simpler. I know there's something in those woods that doesn't want us around. And I'll never forget the way it looked at me like I was the interloper.